Welcome to the My Tech Toolbelt podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Brenda. And this is a podcast where we highlight educators who innovate, engage, and inspire through the use of technology. Thank you so much for joining us today for episode 45 of the My Tech Toolbelt podcast. Hi, this is Brenda Argano. Have you ever seen those small round robots moving around a floor or table, perhaps in a STEAM lab or at a conference that you've been to, but perhaps you, like me, didn't quite understand what they were doing or how it could relate to your classroom? Well, join us today as we speak with Nikki Jones, a third grade teacher from Virginia that loves technology, especially Ozobots. Find out how Nikki uses the Ozobots, not only for coding, but she also uses them to get her students excited for other subjects like math, social studies, and science. Also, be sure to subscribe to our podcast because you don't want to miss any of our upcoming episodes. Don't forget to check out our show notes attached to this episode and on our website, mytechtoolbelt.com, for everything mentioned in this episode. So, without further ado, our interview with Nikki Jones.
Today, we are so excited to welcome Nikki Jones, a 13-year veteran educator from Virginia, to our podcast today. Welcome, Nikki.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay! We're so happy to have you. And today you're going to be telling us about Ozobots and how you're using those in your classroom. And we're going to just preface this by saying we know that we're not actually in a classroom right now for an extended amount of time. However, you were successfully using these Ozobots before, and we'd like to give our teacher listeners an opportunity to hear how you were using them and get them excited. And then when they come back to school, they're going to be ready to use Ozobots in their classroom as well. So,
absolutely.
So, Nikki, you teach third grade in Virginia. And tell us a little bit about kind of leading up to, so tell us a little bit about your school, the population, and then we'll get into what was happening that got you ready for Ozobots.
So I too teach third grade. I am at Chris Young, and it's a STEAM-focused school. So we have a lot of technology available at our school, iPads, laptops, and the Ozobots. I've always been really interested in technology. Before I taught third grade, I was actually an instructional technology coach for a couple of years, and I also taught in the first grade classroom. So I've sort of always had this love for technology and getting it integrated into the classroom. My population of students is very diverse. I have a lot of different learners in my classroom, and at our school, we have about 715 children. We're a pre-K through fifth grade school. My team right now is I have 5 other people on my team. So there's 6 of us total. And we each have between 22 and 24 kids in our class. So I have English as second language learners. I have some special education students in my class, high and low economic status. So we kind of have them all in there.
That's great. And you have 24, I think the mandate for your state, right, is to keep the class sizes pretty small.
So we actually have a grant at our school to stay under 24. That's something that our principal sought out. And it's been, I think this is our second year with the grant. So we won't go over 24. So I currently have 23 students in my class.
That's a nice benefit.
That's a beautiful size because I've always previously, even in our first grade classroom, I had 27, 28 kids in my class, and that's a whole extra group. I mean, that's a big difference, especially when you're talking with friends that are that small. So 24 is a nice cap size, and that's for our classes kindergarten up through third grade.
What a great principal.
I know. I didn't even know that was a thing that principals could write grants like that.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Any principals listening, write that grant for your kinder through 3 teachers. So you had Ozobots in your school because someone else had procured them, but what was happening in your classroom that triggered you to kind of go do this exploration of Ozobots?
So we do have a STEAM lab in our school, and our STEAM coach is phenomenal. She was using them a ton with the STEAM classes. It's like a rotation. So they have PE, art, music. STEAM is one of our rotations. And my kids were familiar with them. They'd seen them before. They'd used them. I honestly didn't even know how to turn one on. And one of my teammates, she actually looped up with her class last year. She was teaching second and she now teaches third with us. She got an Ozobot for her classroom last year and she knows how much I love technology. So she planned this really cool probability lesson. And she was like, Nikki, let's just try it. I promise you're going to love them. And I was like, Christine, I don't even know how to turn them on. So she said, just sign them out. I'll borrow them for you. I promise it's good. Like the kids are going to be able to do it. So I signed them out and the kids were amazing. And the probability lesson they were doing, it was just a basic line code and they were seeing which at the end of each line, there was different colors. So we were just talking about basic probability and the kind of an abstract concept for third graders and seeing their engagement. And they were so excited about this. I just became hooked. So I started a Donors Choose project for 2 Ozobots, and that was quickly funded. And then we just slowly became more and more obsessed. And then we got 2 more. And then I did another project. There was an awesome company called Endless or named Endless, and they were doing a match on Donors Choose for any creative coding projects. And I also did some like coding lessons and got grant gift cards through Donors Choose. So my first 6 came through Donors Choose and awesome donors. I was just posting it on Twitter and throwing it out there to my families.
Nice
and
hustle.
Then, yeah, it was really, it came pretty quickly. And I think people get excited about things like coding and computer programming. And especially when you're putting it into the general ed classroom, it's not just, this set aside STEAM thing. It's just within our day. And then Ozobot actually reached out to me because I was tweeting a ton of just all of the lessons that we were doing in the classroom. And through Ozobot, I became a certified educator. And there are lots of perks with that program. I thought it was going to be like a fancy title, right? I could add that to my signature on my email, a cute little Ozobot with a graduate hat. But the perks were amazing. So I got 12 brand new Evos and this awesome new charging port where they just pop right in there right before we left. So we now have 18 Ozobots in my classroom. And then there's the 18 in the STEAM lab that I can check out and use whenever.
Plenty for everyone.
Yeah.
So the lessons that you were creating, tell us about, because I'm sure there's listeners out there who's like, we don't even know what an Ozobot is. So we'll start there. And then I want to kind of talk about some of the lessons because you shared with us prior to this was like, you're using it in different subject areas. I want to talk about that too, but tell us, so what is an Ozobot?
An Ozobot is this cute little robot. It's actually probably about an inch tall by an inch wide. It looks like a little dome shape. My kids actually have, all of our Ozobots have names, or the first 6 that we had. And they're just like a really likable little thing. So the Evo, which is the newest Ozobot, is actually programmable in a couple of different ways. You can line code. So just using a black marker, you draw a line. You can use the Ozobot markers, or we've used a Sharpie marker, a Crayola marker, any black marker, and the Ozobot will follow along your line coding. Then there are also codes that are predetermined or pre-programmed on the Ozobot that you can add to your line, and he'll do, or we sometimes call it a she, sometimes call it a he, but the robot will read your code. So for example, it's a 4-block code. So you'll put a dash of red, a dash of green, a dash of red, a dash of green. And when the Ozobot reads it, it'll spin. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
A little bit.
A little bit. So is it a little confusing the way I explained it, or a little confusing because you're new to line coding?
I'm totally new to line coding.
Okay. So the other way that you can code is maybe something that you're a little bit more familiar with. You can program it using the Evo app, and it's Blockly coding. So it's just regular block coding like you would do maybe on Scratch or code.org. And there are actually different levels within the Evo app. So even your basic, very beginner, even emergent readers. I have a 4-year-old who loves to code, and there's levels 1 through 5. So the level 1 has basic picture commands. And then as it progresses, it gets up into some more advanced math, the angles and the measurement of the length that the Ozobot will, the distance that it will travel. And then the third way that you can make the Ozobot move is within the Evo app, there's the ability to actually drive it. So it's sort of like a video game controller. It has like the little stick controller, and you can control the speed and where it goes. You can control the lights on it, all different amazing things.
Huh, that sounds really interesting. Okay. I do understand the block coding a bit more than the line coding. I've seen pictures of these things moving along these lines, but I don't know how that works. So
I feel like that's one of the things, Brenda, that I got stuck on at the beginning too, because I didn't know how to use it. And I was like,
right.
What is the purpose of this? So until I saw it in instruction and until I saw it in action, or what the way that I could put it into my math class or into my different lessons, it didn't make sense to me either, because we've had these Ozobots at our school. They were there last year, and I thought that they were great and they were amazing. They were being used in the STEAM lab, but I didn't know how to put it into my practice. So once I figured that out, I feel like it makes more sense. So if you are also new, I think looking at some videos is a really great way to get started.
Definitely.
So transitioning, taking that exactly what you're saying, Nikki, and saying you didn't get it until you could see it in the classroom. And I think for a lot of our teachers, that's really the key. And I know you have some photos and videos that you'll share with us that we can put on our website so folks can see that. But tell us how you went from, that first probability lesson that your co-teacher was working with you on to actually thinking, okay, now I can do this, and this is how it's going to relate to math or social studies or something else.
So when I got the Ozobots, we were going into our fractions unit, which is huge in Virginia in 3rd grade. And there's a huge leap from just this basic identification of, a regional fraction in 1st, 2nd grade. They're identifying, okay, this is 1/4 of it. In 3rd grade, we start adding, subtracting, identifying them on a number line, comparing. So I really wanted to see how I could get the Ozobots into that content. And a number line is a really easy way to do it. So that's kind of where I started. And I was just, as I was looking at the lessons that I've done, prior in years before, I was just trying to think, how could I put the Ozobot in there? And it kind of came naturally. So it's sort of one of those things where I feel like when you get a new technology tool, you want to find all the ways to put it in to your content. And I feel like it just happened naturally the same, because I had the excitement about it and I saw the excitement that the kids had. So I was using things that I was already doing. I wasn't making up new things. It was things that I would have already been teaching. I just found a way to get the Ozobot incorporated. Does that make sense?
That's perfect. I know a lot of teachers that go the other way around. So sorry, Brenda, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, do you have an example of one of the lessons that you used it for?
So the first one that I was talking about is kind of on a number line. And one of the things that we have to do is compare fractions or to show equivalencies. So I gave the kids 3 number lines, and they were just 3 codes across. They had to partition the number line. So they partitioned the 1 into halves, the 1 into fourths, and then the third one into 6 or 8s. And they had to code the Ozobot to at the equivalency. So I wanted them to find fractions that were equivalent to 1/2. At the equivalency, they would make the Ozobot do a trick. So they really like spinning and tornado. So on the the force at 2 force, they had to add the line code. So it's green, red for the Ozobot to spin or do a tornado. It's vice versa. Red, green will do a tornado and the other one will do spin. So it was just a very visual way for them to see something that's kind of an abstract concept of fraction, something that's very new to them. And they really had a lot of success with it.
That's awesome. I love that. That's a great idea.
So now you're using it in what subjects? So it's, I mean, I feel like in my brain, I'm like math, perfect. Like that's a thing, but you said other subjects are kind of coming into the mix, or you're thinking about other subjects. So tell us more about that.
So you're absolutely right. Math is kind of my passion too. I love teaching math, and I feel like the Ozobot just goes naturally into almost all of the strands that I've taught. I've started, because I just have them at my disposal now or as a resource, we've started doing them in the other content areas. So for third grade in Virginia, we study ancient civilizations. And we study Greece, Rome, Egypt, China, and Mali. And at the end of each of these units, we usually have them do some kind of like museum project or a brochure, something to culminate, put all their learning together. And this year, I had them do an Ozobot museum exhibit. So they had to line code the Ozobot. They could make any path they wanted. And then they had to have 6 artifacts. So it also tied in language arts. We were studying nonfiction text features. So they had to put a photograph or an illustration with a caption, and the Ozobot had to travel through their entire museum. So it was a really great way for them to show the contributions and the physical characteristics of the ancient civilization in this just different way. Then we hung those in the hallway, and they actually got to go and see, all the different museums. In science, we had the Ozobot make a food chain. So we have to show that the energy travels from the sun to the herbivore and so on and so forth. So they drew the food chain and the Ozobot traveled, showing how energy was carried. We've also done it with the continents and oceans. So actually right before we were leaving for the pandemic, they had I printed out 4 kind of like a puzzle of the world, and they had different criteria that they had to meet. So the Ozobot had to go to 3 different continents. It had to visit 3 physical geographic characteristics, and then they had to add code along the way. And then we actually used Seesaw for them to record this happening. So they were putting their oral language skills to use as well, and telling where the Ozobot was started, the oceans or wherever it was traveling, and then they were giving facts as it was going. So it's pretty cool to see it kind of evolve into all the different content areas. And that idea of like project-based learning is really a good way to get it into those other content areas.
So my thinking is, where are you getting these lessons? So I'm a teacher. I'm going to get a couple of these, for whatever, my birthday or some holiday, Mother's Day, somebody's going to give me a couple of Ozobots, and I want to try them in my classroom next year. And I'm thinking about, like, where do I get these lessons? Is there a community of lessons, or am I thinking of them myself, or how does that work?
So the Ozobot lesson library, which is actually part of becoming a certified educator, you have to submit lessons through this program. They have so many lessons that are already created that you can go in and download and adapt and use on your own. So that's kind of where I got started. I took off with that probability lesson, but then I kind of went through the Ozobot library and just saw different educators' ideas and downloaded and adapted however I saw fit. But like I said, a lot of what I wanted to do, I didn't want to have to make something else, or does that make sense? I wanted to be able to use it with what I was already doing. So that's kind of where I want educators to realize that it doesn't have to be this separate thing. It can be integrated with your core content and with the lessons that you're already teaching, but now you just have a different means or a different modality for different types of learners too.
And I always think like you had a STEAM lab where the 18 Ozobots lived, that you went kind of initially before you had 6 of your own in your classroom and now 18. But But that's where I want educators to think like, this doesn't, well, we're not a STEAM school. Well, that doesn't mean you can't have these, right? Or you don't have a STEAM lab. That doesn't mean, or you have a STEAM lab. You can still bring them into your room and incorporate them, right?
I would say absolutely not, because I had seen them in the STEAM lab, like seen them when I picked my children up. I hadn't used them. I know my kids had used them some, but I don't think you have to be a STEAM school or have a STEAM focus even in your classroom if it's something that you want to get started. And it's also, I think I was intimidated initially too at the idea of coding and computer programming. You don't have to know computer programming and the technicality of all of the coding. You're able to, and I really took off and learned with the kids. I let them lead the learning. They're not afraid. This generation, they are born with technology. They have it in their hands. They want to, learn and play and explore. And that's really, to be honest with you, that's how I learned. Is I knew that I was going to be using them. So I started CES. So we were doing a lot of playing with the Ozobots during that time. And I learned a lot of things just through that experience. And then Ozobot is pretty active on Twitter. They're constantly retweeting educators that have great lessons. And there's a pretty big following with that hashtag Ozobot or ozosquad. So I actually will, late at night when I'm not sleeping, I'll go through that Twitter and the Twitter feed, and I'll just find and bookmark. I do screenshots. I just screenshot everything I want to save for later and take ideas from there.
I love that, because my sister does that too. She's a third grade teacher as well. And I scroll through her camera roll and it's just screenshot, Pinterest, Twitter,
yes,
Pinterest.
That's how I save everything.
Yes, me too.
Because I pin stuff, but I never go back to it.
Exactly.
So I screenshot it.
I screenshot it as well.
Hey, whatever works. I think that if that's what works for you, by all means do it. It just cracks me up though, because I would have never thought about that. Like, that's not just how my brain works. And so I just love that you teachers have opened my mind up to. And then my camera roll would be full of screenshots,
yeah. Yep.
which yours is probably.
It sure is.
So that's wonderful. So tell us how this is meeting the needs of, you said in the beginning, I have this diverse population, Shannon. We have, kids from that have special abilities, and we have kids that are not native English speakers. And so how has this bridged the gap and kind of filled the need and addressed learning for those special populations that you have in your classroom?
I think because there are so many ways that you can differentiate with the Ozobot, and the basic line coding, you can print out the visual for them to see. And I just have it hanging in my classroom. So I feel like the differentiation is already there with the Ozobot, and you don't need a lot of the language skills to be able to draw that black line and add the code to it. So this year I had a student with special needs. She was a student with autism, and she actually became obsessed with the Ozobots, and this is all she wanted to do. She's the one that named them all. So they all have names because of her, and she was really successful. And sometimes she would actually think of a lesson or idea to do with the Ozobot and put it into action how I hadn't seen it. So back to that kind of letting the kids lead the learning and the abilities for the differentiation to kind of go off the chain, and things that you might not have even thought of, they're able to do on their own. So it was just really interesting to also see some students that maybe weren't successful. So for example, that ancient civilization, if I would have given a multiple choice question test or quiz that they had to do, some of my lower level students that are English is not their first language, or they don't have a lot of home support, that would have been really challenging for them. But to be able to draw the pictures and add a caption with it, they were really successful and they were really engaged. So I feel like it's just offered a lot of different options, or a lot of those different types of learners that you have in your classroom to really be successful.
No, I was just going to say that's awesome, because I think we're moving kind of in this space to having kids be more self-sufficient, more guiding the learning. This is giving the ones that are gravitating naturally towards the technology side of things, esports and programming and coding. It's opening up their minds to that, even though they may not even really be thinking about it that way. But I also love that you are saying like it's giving opportunities for different ways to assess. You can now assess knowledge and understanding of what they're learning through the Ozobots versus a standard test, out of a book or out of a unit.
Yeah.
So it's a great way to formatively assess using the Ozobots, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes. So I've been able to use it for just basic practice for them, but also for that formative assessment piece. And that is one of the things that I really love most about it. And they're doing things they're so excited about, and I'm getting the assessment data or information that I need that's going to also drive my instruction and drive where I go moving forward.
That's awesome. So thinking about, Brenda always likes to ask about homeschooling. So if we were, parents of homeschoolers, which now, hey, we're all parents of.
We're all
homeschool parents now. So anyway, everybody out there should be listening to our podcast. But
also for the teachers that may only get one or two of these to use in their classroom.
Yeah, what do we do? What do we do when we have that? Because I think I was sharing with you, we have one. Brenda and I have one that we were given to play with, and I have a 6th grader. So Brenda, your kids are out of college, so sorry.
Yep.
They're going to have to come in after I play with it with my 6th grader. But what do we do? Like what can I do with him? How can this impact his learning now that I'm working with him more at home?
So I would say to get started, just that basic letting him draw a maze and just experiment and explore with it. I am with my 4-year-old at home, and he is really interested in desert animals and anything that is dangerous. So he actually made his path. He drew a scorpion, a tarantula, a king cobra snake, a crocodile, and some other, a jellyfish, a box jellyfish. So he just drew those on a big piece of paper, and then the Ozobot had to code its way through. He had to travel the line and not get eaten by any of the dangerous creatures. So there's ways that you can adapt this even with very young learners with basic letter identification, have the Ozobot travel and stop at the different, when it stops at a letter, the child identifies. So that could be letter identification, it could be sight words, it could be math problems. There are kind of endless possibilities. So I've used, initially I only had the 2 in my classroom, and I was using it as kind of a center or a station. And now I have a little bit more flexibility, but I feel like even with one, and I actually had a parent at the beginning of the year, we did a math night, and I was so excited about the Ozobots that's what I wanted to be part of the math night. So I made a multiplication in 3rd grade. They have to know their multiplication facts. So it's a basic, it literally looks like a maze, the finger maze that you follow through. I made a maze that they had to solve 4 problems, and the 4 problems that they solve is kind of like a color by number. So it gives them a color code, and they get the 4 colors to fill in, and then the Ozobot will continue on the path. And they keep going. Then there's 4 more equations, and it'll give them a new code. So for beginning learners, that can be basic math. It can be, 2 plus 3. It doesn't have to be multiplication. So I think just the best place to start is kind of looking at what other people are doing and adapting it to how it fits your learner.
Wonderful. Exciting. And these aren't super expensive, right? Ozobots are pretty price point pretty nicely.
They are about $100 for, it's like $99.95. You can get them on Amazon, or you can get them through Ozobot. So they're not really expensive. And like I said, I had a parent reach out to me right after that, and he was like, is this an education thing? Where can I get it? He wanted to buy one for his kid, and Santa showed up with an Ozobot for that child that year.
That's really great. So if I'm a teacher and I'm interested in Ozobot, I can grab one on Amazon pretty inexpensively, start playing around with it while I'm at home during this safer at home play time, and then I can bring it into my classroom and start implementing it. What happens when I want to follow in your footsteps and I'm all in, like I want to be an educator and a contributor to the broader community?
So to be a certified educator, you have to submit 3 high-quality lessons through the Ozobot lesson library. And at first, I was a little intimidated by that because writing a lesson plan to submit seems kind of a daunting task to me, especially my free time is precious. I don't have a lot of it. And the template is really user friendly. It's really easy to go through. So you submit your 3 high quality lessons, and then they reach out and invite you to join the program. And you would submit a video cover letter. And then if you're accepted going forward, you get those awesome perks. So you could even essentially start with an Ozobot, becoming an Ozobot certified educator to get some of the Ozobots into your classroom.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to mention they constantly have webinars and they do giveaways on their webinars. So if it's something that people are, excited about even learning more about, they host tons of webinars, especially now with this pandemic, they've kind of ramped up and are offering even more. And at the webinars, they're giving away 3 free Evo kits, 5 free Evo kits. So it's worth joining for an hour. You get to learn more. The webinars are usually hosted by either Ozobot workers, I don't know what to call them, Ozobot people,
the employees,
or
Ozobot
employees, or by educators that they've reached out to.
I've got a question as well on, is there a minimum or maximum size that the Ozobots can cover? Like, do you need minimum a square foot for them to move around, or do they need something bigger? And also, I want to know what type of surfaces. Is there any limitations on what they can travel on?
So I've used as small as a Post-it they can travel on.
Wow.
The one thing you kind of have to be careful with is how close you are to the edge of the paper. So I usually try to give like an inch of breathing room so they stay on the paper. So like I said, as small as a Post-it note, and the bigger you go, it'll just keep going. The battery life on them, they don't have a battery, but the power on them, they have a lot. It will go. I've never had one die in a lesson or when we've been using it. So as far as surfaces go, it should be like a smooth surface. They will go over things, but the sensors are on the bottom and in the front of the Ozobot. So you want it to be able to read your line code pretty easily without having too much of an obstacle.
Mm-hmm. But so carpet wouldn't be good.
If you had the paper on carpet, I don't think it would be a huge problem.
Okay.
I'm just thinking I don't think that would be a huge problem.
Okay.
I'll try it out and get back to you.
And then if they're just remote controlling it, then as long as it's a fairly smooth surface, they should be okay.
I've never tried it on carpet actually, because our house is hardwood and my classroom has. So I'm not sure. I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay. Probably like maybe the carpet that's at school, it's that really
the rough, because they
flat.
they have they have the 2 wheels on the bottom of them. So I'm sure if it's the flat type of school carpet, they'd be fine.
Okay.
Yeah. There's nothing there's no shag carpet in this school that I've seen.
No.
So.
But if you're at home.
At home, yes. It might be the kitchen. That's our remotes go in the kitchen where there's tile.
The tile. Or we usually do it on like a tabletop surface.
Right.
Big table, yeah. And the paper, like you said, if you have paper spread out, it makes it a lot easier.
But that's neat that it can just stay on just a regular 8.5 by 11 size paper.
Yep. So I've done a lot of stuff where I'll just print out an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper if it's a basic maze that I want them to do or a template or something that I want them to fill in. So initially, when I did that lesson with the museum, they planned on that small piece of paper and an 8.5 by 11. The Ozobot could travel it, but we decided that they wanted to do it on a much bigger scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, so you have done some of the webinars for Ozobot, and so those are on. So like encouraging our teachers to go. If you're listening to this, go check it out. If you it's hard to wrap your head around it, or you want to know what they look like, go check out the website. I think it's ozobot.com. And so go check out their website. You can and you can reach out and to them and watch the webinars and see what it is and see what it does and see how you can implement it into your classroom. And then grade level wise, there's really no like a limit. It's just how can we think about implementing it into our school day and into our lessons.
Absolutely. So the Ozobot, the lesson library has tons of ideas. And like you had mentioned, the past webinars, you can go back and watch any of the past webinars. And they've done a really great job featuring, lower elementary. The webinar that I just participated in or presented at was how to teach math specifically using the Ozobots. So I was a speaker, and then Lisa Richardson was also a speaker, and she shared her expertise in the middle and high school level. So when they're offering these things, they are doing it, across grade levels and across content areas, which I think is really great too.
So many times the high schools get left off.
Or the TK2.
Right, yeah.
Like they're always like, what am I going to do with these? And I think you kind of address that as they don't even have to know how to read. They just have to know how to put the colors in the right places, and the Ozobot is going to follow it.
And even for students that don't have the fine motor skills, you can have the line already created and on like a sticker sheet. So where they're doing, you can purchase, or it comes with your Ozobot kit, there's stickers. So they can put stickers together almost in a puzzle sense. I've had them do them on Avery code. I have a couple of kids that their fine motor skills are just not there to be able to fill in a small box or to keep the code at the right size. So on the Avery label, the codes are already created. So they still have to do that creative thinking. They still have to identify what the code is, but it's already done for them. So I'm not penalizing them, I guess, because they don't have the best handwriting or can't fit in the box. So that's what we suggest for some of our younger learners, or even our older learners who either become frustrated or just don't have the skills to do it completely or correctly.
That's awesome.
I think you've done a great job of explaining it now to me, because before, like I said, I would just see these things going along lines, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but I don't know how it relates. Like I didn't get it, but thank you.
You're welcome. I hope you get it a little more. And like I said, just seeing those videos. So the webinar that I did, my Twitter has tons of them. For me, it was like you're saying, I see this robot and it's cool. It's following a line. But as a classroom teacher, I want to know how to get it into my classroom and into my content without taking time away,
right,
or being another thing, because as educators and teachers, we're often overwhelmed with all of these other things. And sure, we want to teach coding, we want to teach computer programming, but at the end of the year, your curriculum is pretty jam-packed in there, and there's not a lot of extra time and wiggle room. So I wanted to figure out how it can be integrated into what I'm already doing.
Right.
Not that one extra thing. No teacher needs the one extra thing. They're already going to get 10 extra things from their administration of whatever is important to the administration. So I love it. We're going to put links to work that you've sent us, pictures that you've sent us, the Ozobot, the webinar series. I found that on the ozobot.com website. We're going to put that all on our website for folks to see and look.
If someone wants to get a hold of you after listening to this great conversation that we've had, what is the best way that you would like people to get a hold of you? Is it via Twitter or an email or a website or whatever it is?
Twitter or email would be the best way to get a hold of me. I do a lot of connecting with other educators through Twitter, and all that I post is about Ozobots. So that would be a really great place to get in touch with me. I'm also happy to chat over email.
Perfect.
Awesome. And your Twitter will be available in our show notes and on our website, Mrs. Jones 72812.
Yes, ma'am. You got it.
All right. We saw that. All right. So this is a time where we are we're all safer at home. We're all in our homes. We're all teachers who are, and this webinar will come out during that time. So I encourage all of our teachers to kind of take what Nikki has shared with us and go explore it. Take a few minutes, click on the links in our show notes, and go explore the Ozobots and their webinar series and get excited. And you have the time now to kind of think and plan ahead for maybe if your school is going to be able to come back at the end, or what you might want to do next year when you implement, and you're thinking about new and exciting ways to bring this kind of technology into your classrooms. Let's be real, though. How we teach next year will be fundamentally different moving forward than what we did in the past ever, and it will be forever changed due to the fact that students have now had a lot of screen time during this home time. So we're going to need to entertain them and edutain them a little bit differently moving forward. So I think Ozobots are going to be a great addition to a lot of classrooms, and hopefully we'll be able to get more and more teachers excited about it and get some more lessons out in their library, their lesson library, and that anything share with us too if anybody's using Ozobots. Tweet it out and tag us, and so we can see what you're doing and share the great work out with everyone else.
Right. So, I just want to mention, I think that's great that you're talking about. We're having so much screen time right now, even as educators, but the Ozobots are actually able to teach that coding without the screen time. So I think that's really awesome right now. And if you're thinking kind of ahead and you are doing some of that distance learning, there's so much coding offline that you can share with students. I don't think that Ozobot has any, but I know that there are tons of other resources out there that do have this coding offline to get kind of students in the mindset of what coding is and what it will look like. So I think that's a great thing to offer, as a distance learning option for students.
For sure.
Great
for
tip.
Sure. Thank you. Well, thanks, Nikki. Thank you for taking time with us today. I know that weekends are precious, so and your time is so valuable. So we sincerely thank you for getting in touch with us and letting us interview you today and making this happen so quickly. And so we wish you the best of luck during this time of teaching at a distance. And again, thanks reach out to Nikki on Twitter, and all of her information will be linked in our show notes and on our website.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. I had so much fun chatting with you, and I just love being able to share. I hope other people are inspired and want to get their hands on, just getting some different things into their classroom and how to use or get students thinking creatively.
Well, I'm excited. Now I want to try it. But
Brenda and I are gonna have to fight for the one Ozobot that we have. So we're gonna have to tag team it and play with it, and then disinfect it, and then bring it over to the other person's house.
And now we've become big fans.
Big fans. We are big fans of Ozobot. So thank you so much for your time today, and we will we'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you, Nikki.
Right. Thanks.
And
we're out.
Thanks for listening to the MyTech Toolbelt podcast. If you have enjoyed listening, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or send us some feedback on our website, mytechtoolbelt.com. We would love to hear from you. This will help us deliver the content that you want to hear. Thanks, and we're out.